The glass doors of Metropolitan Bank swung open with a soft whoosh as James Carter stepped inside, his worn work boots squeaking against the polished marble floor. He clutched a leather folder against his chest, his calloused hands trembling slightly. "Next customer, please," called Karen from behind the counter, barely glancing up from her computer screen. James approached the teller window, his heart pounding. The fluorescent lights felt too bright, the air conditioning too cold against his sun-weathered skin. "Good morning, ma'am," he said quietly. "I need to withdraw $1 million from my account." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Karen's fingers froze over her keyboard. Her eyes slowly lifted, taking in the man before her, faded denim overalls, a plaid shirt with a frayed collar, mud still clinging to the edges of his boots. She blinked twice, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" $1 million, James said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "I need it today." A sharp laugh cut through the hushed atmosphere of the bank. Did this guy just say $1 million? Richard Blake stood 3 customers back in line, his designer suit probably worth more than most people's monthly salary. His phone was still in his hand, a half-composed email forgotten as he stared at James with undisguised amusement. "Are you serious right now?" Richard stepped out of line, moving closer. "Look at you. You probably rolled out of a barn this morning." Other customers turned to watch. A woman in a business suit smirked. 2 college students pulled out their phones, sensing something viral was about to happen. James felt heat creeping up his neck, but he kept his gaze on Karen. "Ma'am, I have my account information right here." "Sir, Karen's professional smile wavered. "Perhaps you'd like to speak with one of our financial advisors about opening a savings account? We have some excellent programs for." "He's got a savings account all right," Richard interrupted, now standing right beside James. "Probably has about $50 in there from selling eggs at the farmer's market." He turned to the growing crowd. "This is priceless. What's next? Is he going to pay in chickens?" Laughter rippled through the bank. Even Karen struggled to suppress a smile. James's jaw tightened. 40 years of working the land had taught him patience, had taught him that some storms you simply had to weather. But standing here, being mocked like a fool, something Sarah used to say echoed in his mind, "Dignity isn't given, James. It's maintained." "Ma'am," he said firmly, placing the leather folder on the counter. "I understand how this looks. But if you'd kindly check my account, you'll find everything is in order. My account number is here." He slid a worn bank card across the counter. The plastic was scratched, the numbers barely visible from years of use. Richard leaned against the counter, grinning. "This is better than reality TV. Karen, humor him. Let's see this guy's massive fortune. I bet he's got at least $100 in there. Maybe even 200 if it's been a good harvest." Karen took the card with obvious reluctance, her fingers handling it like it might contaminate her manicured nails. The crowd had grown larger now, a semicircle of well-dressed professionals and curious customers all waiting for the punchline of what was clearly a joke. She typed in the account number, her expression already preparing for the apologetic dismissal she'd have to deliver. "Sir, I'm pulling up your account now, and I'm sure we can help you with whatever you actually need." Her voice died mid-sentence. The color drained from her face as she stared at the computer screen. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for air. "What's wrong?" Richard asked, his smile still wide. "Is it overdrawn? Does he owe the bank money?" Karen didn't respond. Her hands had begun to shake. She clicked her mouse several times, clearly refreshing the page, convinced the numbers couldn't be real. "Karen?" Richard's smile was fading now, replaced by confusion. "What's going on?" I need to get my manager." Karen's voice was barely a whisper. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. "Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, I need you right now." David Peterson had been branch manager for 15 years. He'd seen it all: lottery winners, inheritance recipients, entrepreneurs with successful exits. Nothing surprised him anymore. So when Karen called him over with panic in her voice, he assumed it was simply an overreaction to someone trying to scam the bank. What seems to be the problem? Peterson approached with his professional smile firmly in place, already planning how he'd politely escort this farmer out of the building. Karen pulled him close, whispering urgently in his ear. Peterson's smile never wavered as he stepped toward the computer, ready to handle this swiftly and diplomatically. Then he looked at the screen. His practiced composure shattered like glass. "Dear God," he whispered. The crowd pressed closer, sensing something had shifted. Richard's confident posture had become rigid, his eyes darting between the manager's pale face and James's calm expression. "What?" Richard demanded. "What is it?" Peterson looked at James with new eyes, seeing him for the first time. "Mr. Carter, I apologize for the wait. Would you please follow me to our private VIP suite? I'll handle your transaction personally." "VIP suite?" Richard's voice cracked. "What are you talking about? Who is this guy?" Peterson ignored him, his attention entirely focused on James. "Sir, can I offer you coffee? Water? Is there anything you need? I assure you, we'll take care of everything immediately." James felt dozens of eyes boring into him. The whispers had started, confusion spreading through the crowd like wildfire. He could walk away now, could leave them all wondering. Part of him wanted to. But he thought of Sarah again, of the promise he'd made to her hospital bed. "Just the withdrawal, please," James said quietly. "I have somewhere I need to be." The VIP suite was all leather chairs and mahogany wood, so different from the sterile cold of the main floor. Peterson's hand still trembled slightly as he pulled out a chair for James. "Mr. Carter, I must apologize for how you were treated out there. If I'd known—" "You didn't know," James interrupted gently. "That's not your fault." Richard had followed them, unable to help himself. He stood in the doorway, no longer laughing, but not quite ready to believe what was happening. Peterson pulled up James's account on his private terminal. Even though he'd already seen it, the numbers still made him swallow hard. "Mr. Carter, your current balance is," he paused, as if saying it aloud would make it less real, $53,472,000. Richard stumbled backward, catching himself against the doorframe. 53, that's not possible. That can't be real." "It's very real," Peterson said, his voice still unsteady. "Mr. Carter has been a client with us for over 30 years. James sat quietly in the leather chair, his worn hands resting on the armrests. He'd imagined this moment differently. In his mind, he'd simply walk in, make his withdrawal, and leave. He hadn't anticipated the circus, hadn't wanted the attention. "I don't understand," Richard said, moving into the room uninvited. His earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by desperate confusion. "You're a farmer. You were covered in mud. Your boots are dirty." James finished for him. "Yes, they are. I was fixing a fence this morning before I came here. The north pasture gate was hanging loose. But the money, where did it come from?" Richard's voice had become pleading, as if understanding this would somehow restore order to his disrupted worldview. Peterson glanced at James, uncertain if he should share client information. James nodded slowly. "Go ahead. Seems the story's coming out anyway." Peterson pulled up the account history. 10 years ago, Mr. Carter received a deposit of $50 million from Apex Technology Corporation. Since then, through conservative investments and compound interest, his portfolio has grown to its current value. Apex Tech. Richard's eyes widened. The data center company? They're one of the biggest cloud computing providers in the country now. "They wanted my land," James said simply. 500 acres that my grandfather bought back in 1952. Everyone told him he was a fool. Rocky soil, too far from town, worthless for farming. James's eyes grew distant, seeing the past more clearly than the expensive office around him. Grandpa didn't care what people said. He saw something in that land. Worked it his whole life, passed it to my father, who passed it to me. My wife Sarah and I, we built our life there. Raised our crops, raised our dreams. But 50 million, Richard whispered. Why didn't you sell? Most people would have taken that money and what? Abandoned the land my family worked for 3 generations. James shook his head. That land isn't just dirt and rocks. It's my grandfather's sweat. My father's prayers during droughts. It's where I married Sarah, where we buried our dog, where we sat on the porch every evening watching the sun go down. Peterson leaned forward, caught in the story despite himself. So you negotiated something different? A 99-year lease, James confirmed. They could build their data center, run their cables, put up their buildings. But the land stays mine. My children's children will own it long after Apex Tech is forgotten. Richard sank into a chair, uninvited but unable to stand. $50 million, and you kept living like a farmer. James's voice held no anger, only quiet certainty. That's what I am. Money doesn't change that. Sarah and I, we talked about it when the offer came. We could have bought a mansion in the city, traveled the world, lived like royalty. Why didn't you? Richard asked, his voice small. Because we were already rich, James said simply. We had each other. We had good land. We had neighbors who'd help if we needed it. What more does a person need? But you invested it, Peterson noted, looking at the account history. Very wisely, I might add. Your returns have been exceptional. James nodded. Sarah was smart about money. Smarter than me. She said we should let it grow, that maybe someday we'd find the right way to use it. We donated some anonymously, helped some folks who were struggling. But mostly we just kept living our life. Richard struggled for words. That's insane. You could have had anything. Everything. I had everything, James corrected quietly. Right up until 2 years ago. The room fell silent. Peterson's fingers stilled on his keyboard. Sarah got sick, James continued, his voice rougher now. Cancer. Started in her lungs, spread fast. We tried everything. Drove to the city hospital 3 times a week for treatments. Best doctors money could buy. Richard's face had gone pale. Did she? We had 14 months, James said. 14 months of fighting, hoping, praying. The doctors were good. Kind. They did everything they could. He paused, his jaw working. But money can't buy miracles. Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry, Peterson said softly. James pulled a photograph from his leather folder. Even across the desk, they could see it, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, laughing at something off camera. She stood in a garden, dirt on her hands, joy radiating from her face. This was Sarah, James said. Took this picture the summer before she got sick. She just planted tomatoes. Said they were going to be the best crop we'd ever had. Were they? Richard asked, then immediately looked embarrassed by the question. Never got to find out, James replied. She passed before harvest season. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief. Finally, Peterson spoke. Mr. Carter, the withdrawal you requested. The $1 million. May I ask what it's for? James carefully placed Sarah's photograph back in the folder. When he looked up, there was steel in his eyes alongside the sorrow. During Sarah's treatments, I saw things at that hospital. Good things, mostly. Doctors and nurses who cared. But I also saw families destroyed by medical bills. I saw people choosing between treatment and bankruptcy. I saw children who couldn't get the care they needed because their parents couldn't afford it. The hospital in our county is small, he continued. Good people working there, but limited resources. No cancer treatment center. Folks have to drive 2 hours to the city, just like Sarah and I did. Some people can't make that drive. Some can't afford the gas, let alone the treatments. Richard leaned forward, understanding beginning to dawn on his face. Sarah made me promise her something, James said, his voice thick with emotion. Made me swear on our wedding day, on the land we loved, on everything we'd built together. She said, James, don't you let my suffering be for nothing. You help people. You build something that matters. Peterson's eyes were glistening now. You're building a cancer center. The Sarah Carter Memorial Cancer Treatment Wing, James confirmed. Ground broke 6 months ago. We're in the final stages now. This $1 million is for the last equipment we need. Radiation machines, chemotherapy chairs, recovery rooms. Everything a patient needs without having to leave their community. Richard stood abruptly, walking to the window. His shoulders shook slightly. When he turned back, his eyes were red. I mocked you, he said hoarsely. Out there, in front of everyone. I called you. I said. You said what you thought you saw, James replied without malice. Most people do. No, Richard's voice was fierce now, angry at himself. No, there's no excuse. I judged you. I laughed at you. I tried to humiliate you because you looked different than me, because you didn't fit my idea of what wealthy looks like. He crossed the room, standing before James's chair. Slowly, carefully, he extended his hand. My name is Richard Blake. I'm an investment banker. I make 7 figures a year, drive a car that costs more than most houses, and live in a penthouse downtown. James took his hand, the grip firm despite the trembling. Richard didn't let go of James's hand immediately. He held it, staring at their clasped palms, his own soft and manicured, James's calloused and worn. And I'm empty, Richard continued, his voice breaking. Completely empty. I have everything I ever wanted, and I have nothing that matters. He released James's hand and stepped back, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it for the first time probably all day. I grew up poor, Mr. Carter. Really poor. My father worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. We lived in a trailer park outside Detroit. Kids at school made fun of my clothes, my shoes, the fact that I brought peanut butter sandwiches every single day. Peterson stood quietly, understanding this was a moment that needed to unfold naturally. I swore I'd never be poor again, Richard said. I studied like my life depended on it because it did. Got a scholarship to college, then business school. Clawed my way up the corporate ladder. I became exactly what I wanted to be, rich, successful, respected. But? James prompted gently. But somewhere along the way, I became the thing I hated most. I became the people who mocked me. The ones who judged by appearances. The ones who thought money made them better than everyone else. Richard laughed bitterly. I spent 15 years becoming wealthy, and 15 seconds proving I learned nothing from being poor. James stood slowly, his knees creaking from years of farm work. He placed a hand on Richard's shoulder. Son, there's 2 kinds of poverty in this world. The kind where you don't have enough money, and the kind where money is all you have. First kind is easier to fix than the second. Richard's breath hitched. How do I fix it? How do I become someone like you? You start by making different choices, James said simply. You start by remembering what matters. You start by asking yourself what you'd want people to say about you when you're gone. Peterson cleared his throat softly. Mr. Carter, if you're ready, we should process your withdrawal. Given the amount, I'll need to arrange a cashier's check. For security purposes, we can't. A cashier's check is fine, James confirmed. It's going directly to Hartwell County Hospital's construction account anyway. Peterson's fingers flew across his keyboard. I'll make it out to the hospital directly. That will expedite their processing as well. Richard wiped his eyes roughly. Mr. Carter, may I see the plans? For the cancer center. James hesitated, then opened his leather folder fully. Inside were blueprints, architectural drawings, and photographs of a construction site. He spread them across Peterson's desk. This is the main treatment wing, James pointed to the blueprint. 12 private chemotherapy rooms, each with a window overlooking the garden. Sarah always said being able to see growing things helped her feel hopeful. Richard leaned over the drawings, his trained eye taking in the details. This is beautiful. The design is exceptional. Who's your architect? Local firm, Morrison & Associates. Tom Morrison went to school with my nephew. He gave us a good price, but more than that, he understood what Sarah wanted. And this? Richard pointed to a separate structure. Family housing, James explained. 8 small apartments for families who come from far away. Free of charge. If someone has to drive hours for treatment, they shouldn't have to sleep in their car or drain their savings on hotels. Peterson printed the cashier's check with a soft whir of the printer. Mr. Carter, this is remarkable. How much have you invested in total? This million makes it 12 million so far, James replied. Should be finished in 3 months. Grand opening planned for mid-April. Richard's head snapped up. 12 million. You've put 12 million into this? So far, James repeated. Might need more for the final touches. Sarah would have wanted it done right. Richard straightened abruptly, pulling out his phone. His fingers moved rapidly across the screen. What's the hospital's development director's name? He asked. Margaret Stiles. Why? Because I'm going to call her right now and add another 2 million to the project. Richard's voice had changed, filled with purpose. That should cover those final touches and then some. James blinked. Son, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Richard interrupted firmly. Mr. Carter, I make more money in a year than I know what to do with. I have a penthouse I barely sleep in, a car I drive maybe twice a month, and a closet full of suits I'll never wear out. What am I saving it for? What legacy am I building? He looked directly at James, his eyes clear now despite the redness. You're giving your wife a memorial that will save lives. I'm going to honor my father, who worked himself into an early grave trying to give me a better life. He died 6 years ago. Heart attack at 59. I was too busy closing a deal to visit him that week. Peterson handed James the cashier's check. Mr. Carter, your withdrawal is complete. But James wasn't looking at the check. He was watching Richard, seeing something shift in the younger man's face. What was your father's name? James asked. Robert. Robert Blake. He was a mechanic, a janitor, and drove a taxi on weekends. He never complained, never made me feel bad about what we didn't have. He just worked. Then we'll name the family housing wing after him, James said. The Robert Blake Family Center. Families can stay there, free of charge, while their loved ones get treatment. Your father spent his life helping you. Now he'll help others. Richard's composure cracked completely. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs he'd probably been holding back for years. I don't deserve that, he managed. I don't deserve your kindness after what I did. Probably not, James agreed, his tone gentle. But Sarah used to say grace isn't about deserving. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. You want to honor your father? Then become the man he hoped you'd be, not just the wealthy one. Peterson's desk phone buzzed. He picked it up, listened, then sighed. Mr. Carter, it seems word has spread through the bank about what happened. There's quite a crowd in the lobby. People want to apologize, others are curious, and," he paused, "several reporters have shown up. Someone must have posted about the incident on social media." James groaned. "Reporters? I just wanted to make a withdrawal." Richard wiped his face, straightening his tie. "Mr. Carter, if you want, I can run interference. I created this mess. Let me help clean it up." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'll go out there and explain what happened. I'll tell them I made a fool of myself judging someone by their appearance. I'll tell them about the cancer center, about your wife, about what real wealth looks like." Richard's jaw set firmly. "I'll make sure the story that spreads isn't about a farmer getting mocked, but about a man building a legacy." James studied him for a long moment. "You sure you want to do that? You'll look foolish." "Good," Richard said. "I was foolish. Time I owned it publicly." He paused. "Besides, maybe if I tell your story right, more people will want to help. Your cancer center deserves support." Peterson nodded approvingly. "That's actually smart thinking, Mr. Blake. Positive publicity could attract additional donors." James folded the cashier's check carefully and placed it back in his leather folder, right next to Sarah's photograph. "All right," he agreed. "But you tell them the truth. All of it. Don't make me out to be some saint. I'm just a farmer trying to keep a promise to his wife." The three men walked out of the VIP suite together. The bank's main floor had transformed into something resembling a press conference. At least 30 people crowded the space, customers, employees, and 3 people with cameras and microphones bearing local news station logos. The moment James appeared, cameras started rolling. Richard stepped forward, positioning himself between James and the cameras. "My name is Richard Blake. About 30 minutes ago, I publicly mocked and humiliated this man based on his appearance. I'm here to apologize and to tell you all why I was catastrophically wrong." The crowd pressed closer. Karen, the teller, stood near the back, her face pale with mortification. "This is James Carter," Richard continued, his voice steady and clear. "He's a farmer from Hartwell County. When he walked into this bank today requesting to withdraw $1 million, I laughed. I made jokes. I encouraged others to mock him. I judged him entirely on how he looked rather than who he is." A reporter called out, "Why are you making this statement, Mr. Blake?" "Because James Carter is worth more than $50 million, Richard said flatly. "But more importantly, he's worth more as a human being than I may ever be. While I spend my wealth on penthouses and luxury cars, he's building a $12 million cancer treatment center in memory of his late wife. The $1 million he withdrew today. It's for medical equipment that will save lives." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swiveled toward James, who stood quietly, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Another reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. "Mr. Carter, is this true? You're building a cancer center?" James shifted uncomfortably, his hand tightening on the leather folder. "Yes, ma'am. The Sarah Carter Memorial Cancer Treatment Wing at Hartwell County Hospital. Opens in April." "Why?" a third reporter asked. "Why spend your fortune on this?" James's eyes grew distant. "Because my wife died from cancer 2 years ago. Because during her treatment, I watched families choose between saving their loved ones and saving their homes. Because no one should have to make that choice. Because Sarah asked me to help people, and I gave her my word." The bank had gone completely silent. Even the reporters seemed at a loss for words. Karen pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry. I was rude to you. I dismissed you. You did your job," James interrupted gently. "You saw a man in muddy boots asking for $1 million. Anyone would have been skeptical. But I laughed," she whispered. "I thought it was funny. So did I, Richard added, stepping beside her. So did dozens of people here. We all made the same mistake. We saw clothes instead of character. We saw appearance instead of heart. A woman in a business suit raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Carter, can people donate to the cancer center? I'd like to contribute. James looked surprised. Yes, I suppose. Through the hospital foundation. I'll donate 50,000, the woman said immediately. In my mother's name. She died of breast cancer 5 years ago. I'll match that, called a man in a security guard uniform from the corner. My daughter's fighting leukemia right now. This center would change everything for families like mine. Peterson stepped forward, his manager instincts taking over. Ladies and gentlemen, I can provide information about the Hartwell County Hospital Foundation for anyone interested in contributing. We can set up a donation station right here. Within minutes, Peterson's staff had created an impromptu donation center at the counter where James had been mocked less than an hour ago. People lined up, some writing checks, others pulling out credit cards, a few counting out cash from their wallets. $500, said an elderly man. My wife volunteers at Hartwell Hospital. She'll be so proud. 1,000, said a young couple. We just had our first baby at that hospital. We want to give back. Richard moved to Peterson's side, speaking quietly but urgently. I want to set up a matching fund. Whatever people donate today, I'll match it dollar for dollar, up to $5 million. Peterson's eyes widened. Mr. Blake, that's incredibly generous. It's incredibly overdue, Richard corrected. I've spent years making money and forgetting why it matters. Today ends that. James watched the scene unfold with a mixture of emotions playing across his weathered face, surprise, gratitude, but also something that looked like grief. These were kind people, generous people. But they were reacting to a story, to a moment. Sarah would never see this. She'd never know how her death had sparked something bigger than either of them. A reporter approached James carefully. Mr. Carter, how does it feel seeing this response? James was quiet for a long moment. Bittersweet, he finally said. I'm grateful for every dollar, every person who wants to help. But I'd give it all back, every penny I have, for one more day with Sarah. One more evening on the porch. One more sunrise together. The reporter's camera operator lowered his equipment respectfully. But since I can't have that, James continued, his voice strengthening, I'll do what she asked. I'll help people. I'll make her proud. And maybe some family out there won't have to say goodbye as soon as we did. The morning of April 15th dawned clear and bright over Hartwell County. James stood in his usual spot on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun paint the fields gold. But today was different. Today was the grand opening. He wore his good suit, the one he'd married Sarah in, altered slightly over the years. His truck was washed, his boots polished. On the passenger seat sat a framed photograph of Sarah in her garden, smiling at tomatoes that had grown tall and strong after all. The drive to town took 20 minutes. As James crested the hill overlooking Hartwell, he saw the new building rising beside the old hospital. Glass and steel caught the morning light, but landscaped gardens softened the modern edges. Sarah would have approved. The parking lot was already full. James had to park 2 blocks away, which gave him time to prepare himself. Today would be emotional. Today would be difficult. Today would be everything Sarah had hoped for. As he approached, he saw the banners, Sarah Carter Memorial Cancer Treatment Wing, grand opening. Balloons in purple, Sarah's favorite color, decorated the entrance. And there, waiting by the door, stood Richard Blake. But not the Richard from 3 months ago. This Richard wore a simple suit, not a designer one. His smile was genuine, not practiced. And beside him stood an older woman in a wheelchair, weathered hands, tired eyes, but dressed in her Sunday best. Mr. Carter. Richard called out, waving. "I want you to meet someone. This is Mrs. Rodriguez. She's going to be the cancer center's first patient. Stage 2 breast cancer, diagnosed last month." Mrs. Rodriguez reached out a trembling hand. "Mr. Carter, God bless you. Before this center, I would have had to quit my job, move in with my daughter in the city, leave my whole life behind for treatment. Now I can stay home. Stay near my grandchildren." James took her hand gently. "Sarah would be honored to help you fight this." Inside, the treatment wing was everything James and Sarah had dreamed. Warm colors, natural light flooding through large windows, comfortable chairs, and in every room, a view of the gardens outside. The main treatment area held a crowd of over 300 people. James recognized many faces from the bank that day. Karen the teller was there, dabbing at her eyes. The woman in the business suit who'd made the first donation. The security guard with the daughter fighting leukemia. And filling the back rows were people James had never met, donors who'd heard the story, volunteers who wanted to help, patients who'd already registered for treatment. Margaret Stiles, the hospital's development director, stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. 3 months ago, James Carter walked into Metropolitan Bank to withdraw $1 million. What happened next changed this entire community." She outlined the numbers: 12 million from James, 2 million from Richard's initial donation, another 7 million from the matching fund and subsequent donors. $19 million total. Enough to build the cancer center, staff it for the first 3 years, and create an endowment fund for patients who couldn't afford treatment. But the real story, Margaret continued, isn't about the money. It's about a farmer who loved his wife enough to turn grief into hope. It's about a businessman who learned that true wealth is measured in lives changed, not dollars earned. It's about a community that came together to ensure that what one family lost could save countless others. She gestured to a curtain beside the stage. "Mr. Carter, would you please join me?" James walked up slowly, his heart pounding. Behind the curtain was the memorial wall, polished granite with names engraved in gold. At the top, largest of all, in loving memory of Sarah Carter, whose spirit of compassion lights the way forward. Below it, in smaller letters, and in honor of Robert Blake, who taught us that true success is measured by the lives we lift up. James's vision blurred. Richard appeared beside him, also crying openly now. "She'd be proud of you," Richard said quietly. "Of all of us." "I hope so," James whispered. "I really hope so." The actual ribbon cutting was ceremonial. Margaret handed James comically oversized scissors, cameras flashed, people applauded. But the real moment came afterward, when Mrs. Rodriguez became the first patient to walk through the doors. The staff, nurses and doctors who'd volunteered to work at the new center, greeted her with warmth and professionalism. They led her to a private treatment room with windows overlooking roses Sarah had specified in the landscape design. "It's beautiful," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. "I thought cancer treatment would be cold and scary. But this feels like healing." "That's exactly what my wife wanted," James said. "She said healing happens in the heart as much as the body. The environment matters." As the crowd dispersed and the media packed up their equipment, James found himself alone in the family housing wing, the Robert Blake Family Center. 8 small apartments, each furnished simply but comfortably. Places where families could stay together during treatment, where children could do homework while their parents fought for their lives, where no one had to choose between being present and being broke. Richard found him there, standing in the doorway of apartment number 1. "Thinking about your dad?" James asked. "Always," Richard admitted. "But also thinking about what he'd say if he could see this. He'd probably tell me I'm still wasting money on expensive haircuts." James smiled. "Probably right." They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 men from completely different worlds who'd found common ground in loss and purpose. "Mr. Carter," Richard finally said, "I've been thinking. This cancer center is amazing, but it's just one facility. There are hundreds of rural communities that need something like this. What if we made this a model? Created a foundation to help build more centers like this across the country? James turned to look at him. That's a big dream. So was this, 3 months ago. Look at us now. Richard's eyes were bright with possibility. We could call it the Sarah Carter Foundation. Help communities build their own treatment centers, fund medical equipment, support patient families. Your wife's legacy could touch thousands of lives. James felt something shift in his chest. The weight he'd carried for 2 years suddenly felt different. Not lighter exactly, but purposeful. Sarah's death would never make sense. The grief would never fully fade. But maybe, just maybe, some light could come from that darkness. She'd like that, James said finally. She'd like that a lot. That evening, James drove back to his farm. The fields looked the same as they always had, the land his grandfather had bought, his father had worked, he and Sarah had loved. The data center hummed in the distance, its presence barely noticeable among the rolling hills. He sat on the porch with his evening coffee, Sarah's photograph propped beside him. The tomato plants she'd worried about had indeed produced a magnificent crop that year. He'd canned them all, saved every jar, unable to throw away something she'd planted with such hope. His phone buzzed, a text from Richard, board meeting next week to establish the Sarah Carter Foundation. Your input needed. Also, my therapist says I'm making progress. Thank you for that. James smiled and typed back slowly with his farmer's fingers, proud of you, son. Sarah would be too. As the sun set over the land 3 generations of Carters had called home, James raised his coffee cup toward the photograph. We did it, sweetheart. Just like you asked. And we're just getting started. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. Leave a comment telling us about someone in your life who showed you what true richness means. And most importantly, remember that every single day is a chance to turn pain into purpose, grief into grace, and loss into legacy. Because at the end of the day, we're not remembered for what we accumulated. We're remembered for what we gave away and who we helped along the way. Thank you for watching. Now go out there and be someone's James Carter, ***.